There is a moment in almost everyone's day now when the hand reaches for the phone before the mind has decided to. Anna Lembke, a psychiatrist who runs the Stanford Addiction Medicine Dual Diagnosis Clinic, has spent her career sitting across from people at the far end of that reflex, people whose reaching has cost them marriages, careers, and years. What she discovered treating them turns out to describe all of us. Dopamine Nation, Finding Balance in the Age of Indulgence, is her account of why a world engineered for pleasure has left so many people miserable, and what the brain's own machinery reveals about the way back. This is a summary of that book. Lembke's central claim is deceptively simple. Pleasure and pain are not opposites, located in different parts of the brain. They are processed in the same place, and they work like two sides of a balance, a seesaw. Press down on the pleasure side, and the brain, which wants nothing more than to return to level, pushes back with an equal weight of pain. Chase pleasure hard enough and long enough, and you tip the whole system into a chronic deficit, where it takes more and more just to feel normal, and eventually nothing feels good at all. The book is an extended meditation on that mechanism and on how to live wisely inside a culture that has weaponized it. The book opens with a patient Lembke calls Jacob, and with a confession about the difficulty of the modern condition. Jacob's story is extreme, a compulsion that consumed his life. But Lembke uses it to make an unsettling point. We have transformed the world from a place of scarcity into a place of overwhelming abundance. Drugs, food, news, gambling, shopping, gaming, texting, pornography, social media, the sheer number, variety, and potency of rewarding stimuli available today would have been unimaginable to any previous generation. The smartphone, she writes, is the modern equivalent of the hypodermic needle, delivering digital dopamine around the clock. And dopamine itself she introduces not as the molecule of pleasure exactly, but as the currency scientists use to measure how addictive an experience is. The more dopamine a thing releases in the brain's reward pathway, the more addictive it is. This sets up the whole investigation. If we are all now swimming in high dopamine rewards, then addiction is no longer a fringe affliction of the unlucky few. It is the water we all live in. From here, the argument turns to why we are so desperate to escape discomfort in the first place. Lembke observes that we live in a culture that has come to treat any pain, boredom, loneliness, anxiety, ordinary sadness, as a problem to be solved ideally instantly. We have medicalized and pathologized normal human distress, and we reach compulsively for something, anything, to make the bad feeling stop. But running from pain, she argues, is precisely what deepens it. The escape becomes the trap. The heart of the book is the neuroscience of that trap, explained with a homely and unforgettable image. Lembke asks us to picture the pleasure-pain balance as a seesaw with little gremlins hopping onto it. When we experience pleasure, dopamine is released and the balance tips to the pleasure side, but the brain is governed by homeostasis, its deep tendency to restore equilibrium. So gremlins hop onto the pain side to level things out, and here is the crucial part. They don't hop off the moment the balance is level. They stay on a little longer, tipping it past level to the pain side. This is the come-down, the hangover, the vague wrongness after the pleasure fades. With a single indulgence, the gremlins soon hop off and balance returns. But with repeated heavy use, the brain adapts. This is what scientists call neuroadaptation, and it is the mechanism of tolerance. The gremlins multiply and camp out on the pain side. Now the balance is tilted toward pain as a baseline. The person needs the drug not to feel high, but simply to feel normal. And even that stops working. Lembke describes patients who have pursued pleasure so relentlessly that they have rendered themselves incapable of feeling any. They have, in her stark phrase, exhausted their capacity for joy. This is depression and anxiety, understood not as chemical accidents, but as the predictable debt owed after too much borrowed pleasure. Having diagnosed the problem, Lembke turns to the cure, and the first and most powerful medicine is the hardest. Abstinence. To reset the balance, the gremlins have to be given time to hop off, and that requires stepping away from the drug of choice long enough for homeostasis to restore itself. In her clinical experience, this takes about 4 weeks, a dopamine fast. She is candid that the first days and weeks are genuinely awful, because you are now living at the bottom of the deficit you created. feeling all the accumulated pain with none of the relief. But if a person can endure it, something remarkable happens. The balance levels. Ordinary pleasures become available again. The world, drained of color, slowly recovers it. She grounds this in her own life, describing her compulsive consumption of romance novels and cheap erotica, and the relief she found in giving her Kindle away. That personal example leads into the book's practical core, self-binding. Once the balance is reset, how do you keep from tipping it over again in a world designed to tip it? Lembke's answer is that willpower is not enough, and was never meant to be. Instead, we must deliberately place friction between ourselves and our drug of choice, literal, physical, and mental barriers. She sorts these into categories. There is physical self-binding, locking things away, getting rid of the device, keeping the substance out of the house. She catalogues how far people go, from lockboxes to medications that block opioid receptors to surgeries that shrink the stomach, and notes soberly that we now reshape our own internal organs to cope with our food supply. There is chronological self-binding, setting time limits and finish lines, allowing a thing only on certain days or after certain hours. And there is categorical self-binding, sorting the world into permitted and forbidden classes, so that each individual choice does not have to be fought over again. The wisdom here is counterintuitive. We tend to think freedom means having every option always available. Lembke shows that real freedom often comes from voluntarily surrendering options. From binding your future self the way Ulysses had himself lashed to the mast so he could hear the sirens and survive. Then comes the turn that gives the book its depth. Having spent the first half teaching us to press less on the pleasure side, Lembke argues that we can also press deliberately on the pain side, and that doing so is one of the most reliable paths to lasting well-being. This is the principle of hormesis, that small controlled doses of the very thing we've been fleeing can heal us. If chasing pleasure produces a pain debt, then choosing pain produces a pleasure credit. The gremlins hop onto the pleasure side to compensate. Intense exercise, cold water immersion, fasting, hard mental effort, these hurt in the moment and pay dividends of clarity, calm, and genuine pleasure afterward, precisely the opposite trajectory of the drug that feels good now and terrible later. She tells of patients and researchers who use cold showers and grueling workouts as medicine, and the science bears out what ascetics across history have always known. That voluntary hardship, embraced in the right measure, makes a person more alive rather than less. The final movement moves from the individual body to the moral life, and it is here the book reaches furthest. Lembke argues that the antidote to a culture of compulsive escape is radical honesty, telling the truth about things large and small, especially when it is costly and exposing. She has come to believe this is not merely good ethics, but good medicine. Radical honesty forces awareness of our own behavior, builds intimate connection with others who can then hold us accountable, and, most subtly, fosters what she calls a plenty mindset. Lying, she argues, engenders a scarcity mindset. When the people around us deceive us and break their promises, the world comes to feel unreliable, dangerous, and depleted, and we grab for immediate rewards because we cannot trust the future. Truth-telling does the reverse. When people are honest and keep their word, the world feels orderly and safe enough to wait, to delay gratification, to invest in something beyond the next hit. She notes that the feeling of plenty comes from a source beyond the material world, that connectedness and meaning can produce abundance even amid real scarcity. And she closes this movement with prosocial shame, the recognition that shame, so often purely destructive, can be redemptive when it is felt inside a community that responds to honest confession, not with rejection, but with belonging. Shame that isolates destroys, shame that reconnects heals. Taken as a whole, the book lands somewhere far larger than a self-help manual about screens and snacks. What Lembke has really written is a case against the assumption that the good life is the frictionless life. Nearly every source of lasting human peace she arrives at, restraint, voluntary hardship, honesty, confession, being known and held by a community, orienting towards something beyond oneself, is precisely what our age of indulgence has taught us to avoid. Her patients, having chased pleasure to its bitter bottom, rediscover joy only by embracing exactly the disciplines that older and wiser traditions have always prescribed. She has, without quite saying so, rediscovered through neuroscience what the ascetics and the confessors knew all along: that the person who will not endure any pain forfeits the capacity for real pleasure, that freedom is found in binding oneself to the good, and that we are healed not in isolation but in communion, by telling the truth and being loved anyway. The dopamine balance is finally a picture of an older truth: that a life spent fleeing every discomfort ends in the deepest discomfort of all, and that the way out is not more pleasure but the courage to feel, to fast, to confess, and to be known. This is a rare book that is at once scientifically rigorous, clinically vivid, and quietly wise about how to live. Read it slowly. Then read it again with your own habits in mind. It repays both the reading and the reckoning it will provoke.